So, do you really want to know how the sauce gets made? Do you really want to know what was in the first batch of that Popeye's chicken sandwich? Join me in the kitchen. I'm just kidding. You know, like the old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. I could sit here and record myself for an hour showing you how I color grade each of my videos. Oh my gosh. But would that actually teach you how to get the desired look that you want in your videos every single time? And the answer is no. Because the key to getting the color grading that you desire, regardless of cameras and software, actually doesn't begin in the post-production stage. It ends there. Hey everyone, I go by V Lauren on social media, but you can call me Victoria, and welcome to episode 3 of Still Good. Still photos are still good. So I've been getting so much love, views, and even new subscribers from my last episode, and thank you so much. I appreciate the commentary and feedback. It gives me a sense that I'm going in the right direction. So one of the common questions / compliments that I've been getting is about my color grading. And so the common question that I get asked is, how do I color grade? Now, I'll be honest. I would not call myself a videographer or cinematographer by trade. I'm a photographer by trade. As of 2025, it will be 8 years that I've been doing photography. And I find that some of the skills that I have as a photographer actually translates really well when it comes to videography. So everything that I know about color grading, I got from photography. When I was first getting into photography, I started following 2 photographers whose color grading impressed me. Garrett King, also known as Short Stash, and Andrew Glad. I really loved Andrew Glad's color grading style and was mostly influenced by him when it came to editing my photos. But as you know, Short Stash, Garrett King's color grading style, was the one that everyone was trying to copy and imitate, or at least the people that I knew of. But the problem with people trying to imitate his color grading style was that they couldn't get it quite right. And one of the reasons why you can't color grade like your favorite YouTubers or photographers has a lot to do with the lighting and camera settings of the original scene. So even if you download or buy somebody else's pack of presets or LUTs, it's still not a guarantee that your images are going to reflect how the creator made them. Because the key to imitating or mimicking that style, which is something that I personally don't recommend, but the key to replicating their tones and hues is by having the same settings as the creator's original image, because that's what they based their whole color grading package on, is how they shot the initial photo. And that's something that I learned quickly as a photographer when it came to color grading. You have to have the right settings in camera and on location in order for the color grading to come out in post-processing or post-production. But there's multiple factors that affect the outcome of your videos. And so a question that you might ask is, what about your gear and software? Are they a factor? Yes. But good news, it's not the end-all be-all. Learning how to use your gear and software is vital beyond just color grading. Knowing the basics around exposure like shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and even white balance is a factor. Another factor to consider is how you are lighting a scene. There are many factors that come into play when it comes to the final outcome and look of your videos. But your gear and or software is not the final factor or the determining factor per se for how it's going to look. However, it is important to know the limitations of your gear. Every piece of equipment that we own has its own limitations. And so it's important for you to know them so that you won't be disappointed when your content doesn't come out the way that you would like. So for me, I'm working with an R6 Mark II. I'm actually recording this episode on an R6 Mark II. I also use an R8, and I also use Final Cut Pro to edit my videos, and I use Lightroom to edit my photos. There's certain capabilities with these systems that allow me to do what I do, and the same goes for you with your gear and software. Your camera or software might not have the same specs as mine, but it doesn't mean that you can't accomplish the look that you desire. Even if you're an experienced photographer and you have no problem with color grading your photos, You can't expect the same level of expertise when it comes to color grading videos. You can't copy your preset settings from Lightroom into your video editing software and expect to have the same outcome. Because even though there are similarities between color grading photos and videos, the fact of the matter is video color grading is way more complex than color grading photos. Because videos include motion. The camera can move and the subject can move, which means shadows and highlights are constantly shifting. You might have to adjust the levels on your histogram to get them looking good, but just 6 frames later, everything can easily go out of whack. If you're used to shooting in RAW for photos, keep in mind that you won't have the same level of freedom when it comes to editing videos. How much you can push a video really depends on the amount of data you have to work with, so it's crucial to get it right in camera. If you come into videography from a photography background, then you would know that if you get your exposure right on location, it's going to be easier for you during the post-production stage. The same applies to videography. Basically, the video production process has 3 stages. You have pre-production, production, and post-production. In the pre-production phase, it's important to visualize. Imagine how you want your video to look. It doesn't need to be precise, but you need to consider the mood and tone of your video, since color grading plays a big role in shaping both. Visualization is crucial for getting the right settings in the production stage, so that in post-production you can achieve the look that you're aiming for. How you light and expose your videos directly impacts your color grading. Here's how and why. Number 1. The quality of your initial footage will drastically impact your color grading. 2 important factors to consider when it comes to the quality of your initial footage is making sure that you get the proper exposure and you set the correct white balance. Getting these 2 right during the production stage will allow for a seamless color grading process in post. Proper exposure. Getting the right exposure in camera means that you're capturing the maximum amount of detail and dynamic range that your sensor can handle. Think of light like a gradient from black to white, but only a tiny part of that gradient can be seen by your camera. Dynamic range is how broad that visible part is. A wider range means the camera can capture more tones, which makes for a more accurate image. Getting your exposure right in camera results in more vibrant colors, smoother light to shadow transitions, and reduced noise. Well-exposed footage gives you the best data to work with. On the flip side, if your initial footage is too dark or too light, then sometimes the task can be almost impossible to correct in post. So aim to nail the shot in camera. It's usually way easier and looks way better than trying to fix it all in post. And that's something that you learn early on or not early on, because sometimes you're a little bit stubborn, but that's something that you eventually learn as a photographer, and the same applies to videography. In fact, I think even more so, because videos involve motion, whereas photography involves stills. Still good though. Still good. Accurate white balance. Besides getting the exposure right, accurate white balance is super important when it comes to color grading. Cameras feature different settings like auto, presets, and manual to tackle varying color temperatures. The auto white balance tries to adjust itself automatically, hence why I look the way that I look now. While presets like daylight, shade, tungsten, cloudy provide preset adjustments for typical lighting conditions. Now, it might surprise you that I'm using a cloudy preset as opposed to shooting in manual mode, where you can specify a Kelvin temperature setting that either makes your videos lean cooler or warmer. But there's a method to my madness. If the white balance is off, it can create a color tint that'll be very difficult for you to tweak in post-production, especially depending on the profile that you're using to record your videos. When it comes to photography, people have this debate of whether or not you should shoot in RAW versus JPEG. I always shoot in RAW. I never shoot in JPEG. The only times I have shot in JPEG in my life was because my camera was either 1, not capable of shooting in RAW, or 2, I am being hired as a second shooter and the the photographer that I'm working with requests that I shoot in JPEG. which is like the worst thing ever. But the thing is, JPEG does make it so that you need to get everything right in camera. RAW allows for more mistakes. So I like to shoot in RAW because I don't necessarily have to get my exposure perfect, because I always know that in post I can, fix it. But the thing is, you should get it near perfect or close to perfect, or what I say, get workable exposure. I'm working with the exposure that works best for me, that allows me to get the look that I want ultimately, and that should work the same for you. My settings under my conditions might not be the same as yours. Now, video functions a bit differently, but if we were to compare, when it comes to video, standard/neutral profiles are similar to JPEG in that these profiles create footage that looks great right off the bat, which for me, I'm shooting just like in a standard video profile. So when I take out this SD card and I upload and import this video into Final Cut Pro, how it looks right now, it's gonna come out great. How I see it in my viewfinder, it's gonna look excellent on screen. So you're gonna get a near perfect image as long as you expose right with the standard profile. The footage has a normal level of contrast and saturation, closely resembling how our eyes see colors and brightness. So JPEGs can kind of be comparable to like your standard video profiles, whereas RAW photos can be compared to log profile. Log profiles enhance the dynamic range by flattening the image and draining some saturation, while keeping details intact in both highlights and shadows. When you first capture footage, it looks low in contrast and saturation, so you'll need to do some color correction and grading during post-production. And for videos like this, I always use standard profile because it's a smaller file and I'm trying to just crank these out left and right. But for my bigger projects where I care more, I shouldn't say where I care more, but for my larger projects where there is a particular vision that I have in mind, using C-Log is better because it gives me more room and flexibility when it comes to editing, as opposed to when I shoot in standard profiles. That sounded much better, didn't it? So back to what I was saying before. When I shoot in standard profiles, I tend to use the cloudy preset under these conditions. And the reason why I do it is simply for the aesthetic. Now, I'm not saying that cloudy would necessarily work for you. So for instance, I'm shooting right now on an R6 Mark II with a 50 RF lens. I'm shooting at f1.8 at 1/60th of a second, and my ISO is set at 200. In these conditions, it actually looks nice. We're gonna talk more about lighting, so I'm gonna get to that because you're gonna ask, what kind of lighting am I working with? Just to get the base for the look that I want in standard profile, these are the settings that work for me. I do not have this down to a science per se. The reason why I shoot with the settings that I do currently is because I was literally just experimenting one day. So you gotta test it out for your location, what preset works for you, or if not, what Kelvin value will work for you. Or if auto white balance works, then use that. But you gotta figure out what white balance would work to get the type of look you're going for. Now, the thing is, sometimes you might have a vision in mind of how you want your videos to look and in terms of the tone and the mood, but you're not sure how to get it in post. Well, this is where you kind of experiment and play around a bit during the production stage. I had to play around a bit and make some adjustments and tweaks to figure out what kind of look that I want, and I realized this is the setting that provides me with the type of look that I want. Now, when it comes to log profiles, it is recommended to choose a fixed Kelvin temperature. That way there is consistency across your videos. And that's very important because when it comes to the color grading process, if you are, for instance, shooting with 2 cameras or you're shooting at different times of the day, you would like to have consistency across the board. So the thing is that if I'm getting B-roll for this episode, I want to keep in mind that I should use the cloudy preset because that is what I use for the talking head. Now, the interesting thing is that people complimented my color grading in the last episode. And in that last episode, I recorded in C-Log. Now, to be honest with you, I made so many mistakes in that episode. It's funny because when people compliment the color grading, I'm like, thanks. there was a lot of work that I did in the post-production process to try to get a consistent look when it came to the B-roll footage. Talking head footage was, whatever. That shoot was not done with a lot of intentionality. It's the fact that I wanted to test out the studio location before I brought an actual client into the studio. I wasn't filming these scenes with a lot of intentionality. I was just filming just to film. So the thing is, had it been something that I planned before, I think the outcome of the video would have looked totally different, but I did not plan out that video at all. It was very run and gun. So the editing for me was a bit rough, and the post-production process was difficult because I did not actually expose properly in camera. I think I was using like auto white balance, and plus that is a natural light studio. So when it became cloudy or when it became super bright, I had like a lot of like clipping in the highlights. So it was a lot of me working to try to fix the mistakes that should have been fixed on location. So I can't emphasize this enough. So making sure you get your proper exposure and the correct white balance so that you can get the type of look that you desire in your videos. So keeping a fixed preset or colored temperature when it comes to your white balance is super important to maintain that consistency across various types of footage in your films. What also impacts the final look of your color grading, which is number 2, your creative intent and mood. Lighting and mood. The quality, direction, and intensity of your lighting directly contribute to the mood and atmosphere of your scene. The more that I film videos like this, I shy away from natural light. And the thing is, I actually like and enjoy working with natural light, but when it comes to these videos and talking heads, I really prefer to have like complete control. So something that I typically do is that one, I either film at night, so I don't have to worry about daylight, or if I'm filming during the day, I simply block out all of the natural light so that I can have complete control of the lighting. Because one mistake that I've made a couple of times in different videos is by not blocking out the natural light, because in production, I'm like, ooh, this gives off a good feel. But then say if the light becomes obscured by a cloud, the lighting changes. And then for post-production, it kind of looks funny. You've watched probably so many videos where somebody's filming in natural light. It goes from like this warm temperature to not as cool temperature, just like that. So for me, I don't want that. So something that I do is I block out all of the natural light that is in the scene. If you want to work in a space where you control the lighting 100%, that is a tip that I would recommend. And that is something that I personally do. Now, when it comes to my lighting choices, it's really not that deep. I film with an overhead light. And as you can see, it looks a little bit darker. Now, I don't really necessarily like this when it comes to color grading because I like a little bit more light. So that light is kind of like my fill light. And then I have the light that is my key light right here. So remember, the quality, the direction, and intensity of your lighting impacts your color grading. So I think the lighting is pretty good quality-wise, but then also the direction. I've kind of played around with different types of lighting setup, and one day I was just like messing around to see which side looks best and what I prefer, and I found out this new setting actually works great. So let me go ahead and turn this light on. See, much better. So it really depends on what you want to convey, because the direction of your lighting, that will directly impact your mood and tone in your videos. So for me, I'm working with 2 lights. So I just have a key and fill light, and everything else is what I've programmed in camera and dialed my settings for to get the right exposure and the correct white balance. So it may seem like a lot of information, but for me, it's visually playing around. I don't like to think of these things from a technical standpoint. I think of it in terms of what looks good to me. We just going off of vibes here, man. I don't know any other way how to do this. Because I'm a self-taught photographer and I'm actively teaching myself videography too, so. Light color temperature. The color temperature of your light, which is usually measured in Kelvin, affects the overall warmth or coolness of the scene. So when you're making adjustments to your white balance in camera, keep that in mind. Now, one of the reasons why I feel like the cloudy presets worked is given the overhead light and how it looks, and also this light. I cannot adjust it. Overhead lighting, whatever bulb is in there, that's what's gonna be. The softbox lighting, whatever bulb is in there, that's what it's gonna be. So any adjustments that I have to make to the color and look, the mood and tone, all of that stuff, is gonna come from the adjustments that I make in camera. So keep that in mind. The most flexibility that you're gonna have in this control setting is what you tweak and dial your camera settings to. And also, what I found is that using the cloudy preset is what gives me this golden tone in post. Because somebody asked me, how do I get this golden look? And I think that's what they're referring to. I'm like, I don't really know what golden look you're referring to, but I think this is what they mean because I use a cloudy preset. And so because that's already established in the initial footage, I can kind of pull that out a little bit more when it comes to post-production. So, complementary colors. So it's not just the technical things that you got to think about when it comes to your camera settings or the lighting, but it also comes to the actual colors in your scene. Complementary colors are color pairs that, when positioned next to one another, produce the most intense contrast and boost each other's brightness. They sit directly across from each other on the standard color wheel. The most frequently seen complementary color pairs include red and green, blue and orange, as well as yellow and purple. So intentional use of complementary colors in your background and lighting can enhance the final look of your videos. Outside of complementary colors, you should consider analogous colors, are colors that sit next to one another on the color wheel, usually consisting of 3 or 4 shades. This combination produces a harmonious visual flow. Complementary or analogous colors, depending on which you prefer, help in establishing your color palette. In the pre-production stage, when I'm thinking about a video to produce, I'm also visualizing how it could potentially look. I'm thinking about what elements are going to be in my background, and I also am considering what I'm going to wear, especially when it comes to doing talking heads. Now, when you're out, in the field, on location, filming, that might be a little bit different because maybe you can't necessarily control how much is in the background or what colors are in the background. But if you are in a controlled setting environment, then you can dictate more when it comes to the color palette. So I know I'm going to be working with this brown background, so I'm looking up what are complementary colors to brown because it creates the nice color palette. If you try to use somebody else's presets and LUTs, their presets and LUTs were designed using the creator's original image. So you cannot pull from things that are not already there in the image. So that's why when you are in the pre-production and production stage, you need to think about what elements you're going to have in camera or on location because you're giving your system the most data to work with so that you can get the look that you want. You can't force a look that wasn't built in there to begin with. Considering all of these factors is important to getting the look that you desired in your videos. I'd like to think of color grading as an enhancement of what is already there in the initial footage. So I hope that with this episode, you will be now fed for a lifetime because I taught you how to fish. I wanted to create, a video that was mindful of the different software and gear that everybody has, because I don't want somebody to sit there and watch me do a tutorial on Final Cut Pro and it's like, well, gee, I don't have Final Cut Pro. Should I get Final Cut Pro? It's like, no. These are tips that can work regardless of the software, regardless of the camera. The goal is to get the look that you desire. Again, I think it's really hard to replicate somebody else's hues and tones unless you have or are working with similar footage as they are. So I gotta do what works best for me the same way you gotta do what works best for you. Although this episode didn't really touch on stills and it was more covering motion, I hope you still know that motion is great, motion is cool, but still photos are still good. That kind of sounded, like a Dr. Seuss, like one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish.